Can you look at this manga and imagine it improved? Well, that's no brainer, of course you can. But now look at it at its peak. Can you imagine it improving again to the point where it's leagues better? The answer is... To say Takehiko Inoues is one of the best writers and artists in the world would be an understatement. The way this man can create something out of nothing, the way he is unrestricted by the size of his canvas is remarkable. He can create masterpieces in small corners of pages. He can create magnificent double-page spreads and the murals many times larger than a human alone. Takehiko Inoues' skills in the manga world could only be matched by the likes of the late great Kentaro Miura, Makoto Yukimura, and Hiroya Oka. Say whatever the fuck you want about Gantz, the art is sick. Also, I think Inoue likes Samurai Champloo. I don't know, this drawing just looks like Mugen. Vagabond, over its near 300 chapter runtime, underwent many transformations. Some eras improved the art, but others completely changed the very way Inoue makes art. In this video, we will be talking about the artistic evolution of Vagabond, and what better way to begin the video than with the tools Inoue used. In the beginning, Vagabond was illustrated just like any other manga, which are screen tone textures, G-pen usage, and a whole bunch of ink. As a result, the only thing that made Vagabond's unique art, well, unique, was Takehiko Inoue's style. His sharply drawn eyes, toned faces, and realistic proportions differentiate the manga from the others. Usually that's what happens when you actually draw the fucking noses and do not give these characters a pug proportion. Fun fact, anime characters are actually based on cats, so I guess all of us are furries then. The G-pen is a consistent tool. It allows for long, smooth, and fine line work. Best way I can spot its usage is by looking at the character outlines, and that's the best way I can describe early Vagabond style. Consistent. What you get on page 1 is what you get on page 2, and aside from the whole Giga Chad Ultra Instinct drawings Takehiko would do sometimes, the style usually never changed. But as Vagabond entered its many years of publication, that changed drastically. Takehiko started using brushes. Lots and lots of brushes. His favorite one, which also made his life absolute living hell, real story by the way, he was actually just losing it here, is the Menso brush. Takehiko started using this brush for all of his line work and hatching. The Menso brush is a very versatile tool which allows for a wide range of line thickness and slimness. But this also comes at a great cost. Mentally and physically, it is really hard to use. Initially I had a hard time understanding why these pages looked so odd, and then I realized it's not the pages are actually odd or odd, but rather it's the result of Takehiko masterfully using the Menso brush's slimness, allowing him to just add a shit ton of detail on a small space. In addition to Takehiko using what is essentially a needle for line work, if that wasn't painful enough, he also started to draw on larger pieces of paper. Traditionally, mangaka draw on the typical printer paper, which is A4 size, but in comparison, Takehiko started painting on A3. And let me remind you, Vagabond was a weekly publication. He had 3 reasons to do this. Firstly, he hated himself, secondly, he hated everyone else, and lastly, this allowed him to add a tremendous amount of detail to a comparatively small size. As the format of his drawings shrunk to accommodate the tankobon volumes, the detail also got condensed. This hid imperfections, improved the line smoothness and fineness, whilst at the same time, it made the manga feel a lot more photorealistic. The more detail you condense on a specific area, the more it plays tricks on your brain, making it feel like it's an actual photo rather than a drawing. Usually, most mangas are best experienced through physical volumes, but for the reasons we mentioned, this goes especially for Vagabond. My last video flopped so hard that I had to ask YouTube support if there was something wrong. I was actually just traumatized, so they told me 98% of my viewers aren't subscribed, so please just ring the bell and subscribe, man. There's another reason I'm gonna lose my mind. I rewrote this script so many times to the point where I forgot where I placed the transition for the next topic. So here's a quick tip from me instead of that. If you draw eyelids with 2 lines instead of 1, it will instantly get more volume and look insanely better. I learned that from Vagabond and Berserk. Aside from allocating specific brushes for characters' bodies, Inoue also started to use a larger brush for the character's hair. This made the hair far more fluid and natural, whilst at the same time it gave the manga that early 20th century samurai film style. Sadly though, the talk about brushes don't end there. I'm getting sick of my own script. Only thing that's keeping me afloat is this soundtrack. Huh, that's a familiar face. Aside from the brushes meant for hair, hatching, and line work, Inoue also started to use larger brushes or markers in order to draw deep inky blacks on characters. He started to paint the manga, not to draw it. Previously, most of the detail came from individual G-pen strokes, or hatching gradients being used in tandem. This approach of early Vagabond made the entire style far more tidy, organized, and consistent. But as Inoue started to develop his own unique style, and as it started to demand a far more larger array of tools, the manga became chaotic. Every detail, every line, every blade of grass and hair strand was individually given time. But a lot of these brushes brought forth a lot of uncertainties. You can't predict how a line will turn out from a brush. Inoue himself stated that hesitation could lead to a disaster, and thus the style started to take up a more unique feel. Vagabond, to be more specific, started to resemble shodo or sumie, which are traditional Japanese artistic developments. Every single time I say that sentence I feel like a dork. Both of these genres require expert penmanship in painting, and Inoue started to implement a lot of those techniques into his own manga. A lot of these panels, as a result, started to look like exhibition paintings rather than individual panels, and oftentimes they served not as just eye candy, and let me tell ya, it's definitely fucking, but it also served as a storytelling tool. Takehiko started to illustrate spiritual aspects of life. Previously, what you saw in the manga is what you would get consistently. Its style was always just a visual description of what was actually happening. But as the story went on, the art also started to give you not only unique pages, but also it started to be invaluable to the story. In some panels, Inoue would draw in expert clarity with less ink to show you the calmness zen of Miyamoto Musashi. Other times, Musashi would be radiating ink, implying his unstable emotional state. Sometimes it would even rub off on the environment around him, and this gave a lot of these panels thousands of stories to tell. Meanwhile, most mangas, after hundreds of chapters, can't make me remember the MC's name because they were so fucking ass. Just look at this name, bro. They're both called manga. It's a fucking disgrace. Because Inoue was far more consistent with his detail and technique in the previous few arcs, the detail across the pages were also well spread. The faces, the clothing, the hair, and the backgrounds were all drawn in similar G-pen fashion. But as Inoue started to go for a more abstract and even chaotic feel to his art, one thing stood out to me. No matter how busy every page was, the faces, especially the face of Miyamoto Musashi, was always the sharpest and clearest part of the image. This is what they call selective detailing, and this is why, despite Inoue sacrificing 9 squids worth of ink, you never lost track of Musashi. No matter what chaos was unfolding in front of him, his face and his emotions were always crystal clear. As Takehiko Inoues made the art style of Vagabond complicated as the years went on, that similar complication also applied to the faces, but the faces brought in new forms of challenges for Takehiko Inoues. One of the biggest challenges he had to face whilst making Vagabond was how he would actually show Miyamoto Musashi's expressions after so much development he went through. Miyamoto Musashi changes so much throughout the story to the point where he is incomparable to how he began the story, literally in every single way, including his name. As a result, Inoue really had to think about the way he expressed Miyamoto Musashi's expressions. He had a hard time delving into the character he wrote because he just became so complex, and a lot of this detail also allowed Inoue to have subtle expressions. Naturally, having a lot more detail in your art style allows you to have a lot more different expressions. Small alterations to a smile and a simple art style can just make the character look sad instead of happy, but the small frowning of the eyebrows, slightly closed eyes, and a half-hearted smile can really shine in a detailed media. It can display a completely different emotion. Two of the most prominent examples when Inoue was having genuine issue trying to depict Miyamoto Musashi the exact way he wanted was when Miyamoto Musashi was giving a soft smile and when Miyamoto Musashi was praying. These two images, which are also some of the most iconic parts of Vagabond, just became a nightmare for Inoue to write because he just couldn't quite delve into Miyamoto Musashi's mind. He couldn't quite express the way Miyamoto Musashi would actually express these emotions, and he was never happy with them, despite us viewing it as a masterpiece.